Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Very warm welcome to this Monday morning Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam discussion. Today we are reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, entitled The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 1, Text 4. Before we discuss on this verse, let's sing Jai Radha Madhav. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Shri Radhe. Jai Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Shri Radhe. Jai Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Jaya Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajakacharya Stotra Shatashi Śrīmad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय. नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय. श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय. वृंदावन धाम की जय. मथुरा धाम की जय. जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय. मायापुर धाम की जय. गंगा माई की जय. यमुना माई की जय. तुलसी देवी की जय. भक्ति देवी की जय. सामवेद भक्त वृंद की जय. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale. Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paśyati Deshatarine. Sarvam Shri Krishnarpanamastu. Krishne Matirastu. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, entitled The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 1, Text 4. Dehāpatya-kalatrādiṣv ātma-sainyeṣv asatsv teṣāṁ pramatto nidhanaṁ paśyann na paśyati. Dehāpatya-kalatrādiṣv ātma-sainyeṣv asatsv teṣāṁ pramatto nidhanaṁ paśyann na paśyati. Dehāpatya-kalatrādiṣv ātma-sainyeṣv asatsv teṣāṁ pramatto nidhanaṁ paśyann na paśyati. Translation. Persons devoid of ātma-tattva do not inquire into the problems of life, being too attached to the fallible soldiers like the body, children, and wife. Although sufficiently experienced, they still do not see their inevitable destruction. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. This material world is called the world of death. Every living being, beginning from Brahma, whose duration of life is some thousands of millions of years, down to the germs who live for a few seconds only, is struggling for existence. Therefore, this life is a sort of fight with material nature, which imposes death upon all. In the human form of life, a living being is competent enough to come to an understanding of this great struggle for existence. But being too much attached to family members, society, country, etc., he wants to win over the invincible material nature by the aid of bodily strength, children, wife, relatives, etc. Although he is sufficiently experienced in the matter of by dint of past experience and previous examples of his deceased predecessors, he does not see that the so-called fighting soldiers like the children, relatives, society members, and countrymen are all fallible in the great struggle. One should examine the fact that his father or his father's father has already died, and that he himself is therefore also sure to die, and similarly his children, who are the would-be fathers of their children, will also die in due course. No one will survive in the struggle with material nature. The history of human society definitely proves it, yet the foolish people still suggest that in the future they will be able to live perpetually with the help of material science. This poor fund of knowledge exhibited by human society is certainly misleading, and it is all due to ignoring the constitution of the living soul. This material world exists only as a dream due to our attachment to it. Otherwise, the living soul is always different from the material nature. The great ocean of material nature is tossing with the waves of time, and the so-called living conditions are something like foaming bubbles, which appear before us as bodily self, wife, children, society, etc. Due to a lack of knowledge of self, we become victimized by the force of ignorance and thus spoil the valuable energy of human life in a vain search after permanent living conditions which are impossible in this material world. Our friends, relatives, and so-called wives and children are not only fallible, but also bewildered by the outward glamour of material existence. As such, they cannot save us. Still, we think that we are safe within the orbit of family, society, or country. The whole materialistic advancement of human civilization is like the decoration of a dead body. Everyone is a dead body flapping only for a few days, and yet all the energy of human life is being wasted in the decoration of this dead body. Shukadeva Goswami is pointing out the duty of the human being after showing the actual position of bewildered human activities. Persons who are devoid of the knowledge of ātma-tattva are misguided, but those who are devotees of the Lord and have perfect realization of transcendental knowledge are not bewildered. Before we discuss on this verse, let us offer some prayers. Om Ajnanatirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Namashreshtam Manamapi Shachiputram Atra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Murupurim Mathurim Goshtavati Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavams Shri Rupa Agrajatam Sanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Adadandastrinam Dante Idam Yacha Punah Punah Shriman Rupa Padambhojam Dhulisyam Janma Janmani He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Today we are reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, Text 4. Dehāpatya-kalatrādiṣv ātma-sainyeṣv asatsv teṣāṁ pramatto nidhanaṁ paśyann api na paśyati. Persons devoid of ātma-tattva do not inquire into the problems of life, being too attached to the fallible soldiers like the body, children, and wife. Although sufficiently experienced, they still do not see their inevitable destruction. So this is a verse spoken by Srila Shukadeva Goswami who we see is a purely liberated personality, a pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. And whatever words are coming from his lotus mouth are for the benefit of the whole humanity. Krito loka hitam nripa, ātma-vit sammata pumsa shrotavyadishu yapara, variyanesha te prashna. So Srila Shukadeva Goswami, when the sages assembled in the forest of Naimisharanya, headed by Shaunaka Rishi, asked Suta Goswami about the questions of understanding our real nature, Srila Suta Goswami says that this is the question that everyone should be asking. And Sri Suta Goswami says that this is the transcendental question, the best question to be asked. Variyanesha te prashna. Why? Because krita loko hitam nripa. Because when we are engaged in the discussion of understanding our original constitutional position, our original nature, that is the best use of the human form of life. Variyanesha te prashna krita loko hitam nripa ātma-vit sammata pumsa. So what is ātma-vit? So here Srila Prabhupada actually mentions the word ātma-tattva. Persons devoid of ātma-tattva do not inquire into the problems of life. So we have to understand what is ātma-tattva. What is meant by ātma-tattva? So ātma-tattva, so tattva is the truth, and atma is related to our eternal existence. So Krishna actually mentions in Bhagavad Gita that achedyohyam addahyohyam akledyo ashoshevacha nitya sarvagatah sthanur achaloyam sanātana. So the real constitutional position of all the living entities in this whole universe is that they are eternally existing. The body is like a cloth that is worn. So vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grananti naroparani tatha shariraya vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, Krishna gives the example of how a person would give up the old cloth and put on a new cloth. So if a cloth becomes old and torn, so one will give it up and one will put on a new cloth. So similarly, the living entity takes on a new body when the old body has done its job. So this is the existence of all the bodies that we see in this material universe is the covering of material nature. So maya dhakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetu nanena kaunteya jagad viparivartate. Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that under my direction, the material nature is creating this multifarious things that we see in this universe. So we see that when we look at the material world, it is made up of matter. Whatever we look in the material world is composed of matter. And one of the things about matter is it goes through Shad Vikar. It is called the 6 kinds of changes that happens when something has got this matter involved in it. So first of all, it takes birth. That means it comes into existence. Then it grows. It stays for some time. It produces byproducts. It starts dwindling, and finally it vanishes. So there are these 6 kinds of changes that happen. And this is seen in anything that is matter. This particular phases, 6 phases are seen in anything that is matter. If you look at for example, if someone is born, they come into existence when they take birth, then they start growing. And then the growth stops. So that means they're staying there. Then there is, if they so desire, they do the reproduction, and then there starts to be a dwindling stage, which is that the whatever capacities are there, they start becoming weak and they start dwindling, and then finally that particular body gets vanished. How does it get vanished? When the actual living person within the body leaves the body. So that is the real understanding of the scriptures, and that is ātma-tattva. But here there is the mentions dehāpatya-kalatrādiṣv, and the translation, the synonyms: deha is body, apatya is children, kalatra is wife, and adishu, everything in relation to them. But this is what happens when one takes birth in the material world. Immediately there is attachment. Yasyatma-buddhi kunape tridhatuke swadhik-kalatrādiṣv bhaumyai-jadi yatirtha-buddhi salile na kareche janeshu abhikneshu sa eva ghokhara. So this is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam about how in the conditioned material state, our intelligence, atma-buddhi, kunape tridhatuke. So actually this material body is a bag of 3 types of ingredients: kapha, pitta, and vayu. That is mentioned in the Ayurveda, the stream of knowledge that deals with one's health and one's life and one's longevity. So Ayurveda mentions that the body is composed of these 3 main ingredients. So bile, mucus, and air, kapha, pitta, vayu. And this presence of this bile, mucus, and air is what so if one considers oneself this body, yasyatma-buddhi kunape tridhatuke, that this body is made up of these 3 ingredients, and swadhi-kalatrādiṣv bhaumyai-jadi, and from one's own mind and intelligence, swadhi, dhiyo yonaha prachodayat. So this dhi is intelligence. So so through one's intelligence, one is thinking that kalatrādiṣv, that everything related to this body is mine, and whatever land I am born in is worshipable. Bhaumyai-jadi, and yet tirtha buddhi salile na kareche janeshu abhikneshu. And one goes to the places of pilgrimage to take bath in the holy rivers, but does not associate with the saintly people residing in those places. So Shastra mentions that sa eva gokhara. So unfortunately, even though the people might have human form of body, but because the person is not trying to understand their original constitutional position as an eternal part and parcel of Krishna, that human form of body is not being used in the right way. It is unfortunately being used as an animal's body. So this is ahara nidra bhayamaithunam cha samanyam etat pashubhir naranam dharmo hi teṣāṁ adhiko vishesho dharmena hina pashubhir samana. So this is the another quote from the scriptures where it says that ahara, eating, nidra, sleeping, bhaya, defending, and maithunam, reproducing. So these 4 things are actually common between human beings and other species of life: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Dharmo hi teṣāṁ adhiko vishesham. So what is it that distinguishes the human being from other forms of life? It is dharma. So what is dharma? Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. So the religion, the real religion, is the code of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And how do we understand this code? We understand this code when we are aware of our existence. Generally, what happens when one is totally attached to matter is that one just goes with the flow. What do I mean by going with the flow? One is just engrossed in all the sensory perceptions that one gets. One is totally engrossed in that. So when we become totally engrossed in enjoying the sensory perceptions, we do not understand that we are actually the observers of those sensory perceptions that is happening to us. So there is in the scriptures there is this this concept about sakshi bhava. So sakshi bhava is that that state where one remains as an observer, sakshi. Upadrashta anumanta cha bharta bhokta maheshwara paramatmati cha apiyukto dehesmin purusha para. So upadrashta is the overseer. So the scriptures actually mentions about how the living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of the super soul are like two birds sitting in the branch of the same tree. So one bird, the living entity, is engrossed in enjoying the fruits, while the other bird is constantly looking at the bird that is enjoying the fruits. So this is how there is this presence of dehesmin purusha para. Within the body, there is a transcendental person. And all these understandings is the real dharma. The real religious principle is when savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktir adhokshaje ahaituki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. So it is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam about what is the transcendental religious principle, the most transcendental religious principle, paro dharma. For all the living entities, what is the supreme religious principle? Savai pumsam paro dharma yato bhaktir adhokshaje. What is it? It is rendering loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who cannot be known by blunt material senses, who cannot be seen by blunt material eyes. Adha krita akshaja. So that is the real religious principle, the supreme religious principle, that when one engages in loving devotional service, and this is very important, adhokshaja. So adhokshaja, ahaituki apratihata. And what kind of devotional service should it be? It should not be. It should be costless, and it cannot be checked under any circumstance. Ahaituki is costless, and apratihata is it cannot be checked under any circumstance. And what happens when one does that? Yayatma suprasidati. Then one gets the real bliss that is always accessible, because our nature is fully blissful. Our original nature is Satchidananda. As Krishna is Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. So he is an embodiment of truth, eternality, and bliss. So similarly, the living entities are Mamai Vamsho Jiva Loke. Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that all the living entities are Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanātana, eternally my part and parcels. So as eternal part and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we are purely blissful. We are totally unaffected by everything that happens to the body, to the mind, or to the intelligence, which is always helping the mind to go in the right direction. So we are neither the mind nor the body, nor the intelligence. So we are the awareness behind all this. And when we understand that our real nature as eternal part and parcel of Krishna, then that is yayatma suprasidati. One gets the real bliss. So the real bliss is always present within us. But when that bliss is not accessed, when that bliss gets covered, and Krishna actually mentions what the different types of covering that exists in the living entities. Dhūmenāvritam vahanir yatha ādarshanam alena cha yato benāvritam garbhas tatha tenedam āvritam. So there are different types of coverings that the conditioned living entities have. And because there is the covering, the living entity has to take birth after birth. So until the covering is totally removed, one has to punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jatare shayanam. So as Srila Shankaracharya mentions in Bhaja Govindam, one has to keep taking birth and one has to keep dying. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam. And one has to keep being in the womb of many unlimited mothers. Punarapi janani jatare shayanam. So then Srila Shankaracharya continues in that prayer. He says that iha samsare bahudustare kripaya pare pahi murare. So Srila Shankaracharya says that this material world, samsara, is very difficult to cross over. And Srila Prabhupada actually gives a very good example of ocean. And that's why the material world is called Bhava Sagar. So Bhava means continuously taking birth and death, and Sagar means ocean. So there is nrideham adyam sulabham sudurlabham plavam sukalpam guru karnadharam mayanukulena nabhasvateritam puman bhavadbhiya nataret sa atmaha. So this is a beautiful verse in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam where it is mentioned about how this human form of life is very rarely attained. Nrideham adyam sulabham sudurlabham. It is the best form of life for one to engage in devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's why it is sulabham. So sulabham tasyaham sulabha partha nityayuktasya yogina ananya cheta satatam yo mam smarati nityasha. So that sulabha is that which is easily available. So Krishna mentions how he becomes easily available. He becomes easily available when one is in that state of mind where one is ananya cheta. One's mind is constantly absorbed in remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Satatam, always, yo. Mam smarati nityasha. One who is remembering me always. So Krishna says that tasyaham sulabha partha. To such a person, I am easily available. Why? Because nitya yuktasya yogina. Because such a person is engaged in my loving devotional service constantly. So this constancy is extremely important. This ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paryupasate teṣāṁ nityabhiyuktānaṁ yogakshemam vahamyam. So ye tu sarvani karmani mayi sanyasya madpara anyanya naiva yogena mam dhyayanto upasate teṣāṁ aham samruddharta mrityu samsara sagarat bhavami nachirat partha mayi aveshita chetasa. So this is a beautiful words of Krishna to Arjuna. So teṣāṁ aham samruddharta mrityu samsara sagarat. So again that sagara, this ocean of birth and death. So Krishna says that mam dhyayanta upasate ananya naiva yogena. So this is this constant remembrance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yadyad nischalati manas chanchalam astiram tatastad niyam yaitat atmanyeva vasham nayat. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that whenever the mind is going, so the senses and mind are always guided by the sense objects. So whenever there is a sensory object which one is attached to, when one sees that, the senses are going in that direction. And then the mind is also going in that direction. Or the mind, if it is not absorbed in the remembrance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it starts getting engaged in the lower taste. So therefore, Krishna mentions, param drishtva nivartate. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. So, so the living entities, it's a huge conundrum that the living entities are involved in terms of their existence in the conditioned material life, and that is that what is seen is only the body. Right? One does not see the soul, but one can know that there is something that is existing, that because of which one can distinguish a dead person from a living person. What is it that distinguishes? What is the difference between a living person and a dead person? So a living person has got consciousness, and because there is consciousness in the living person, one is taking breath, the heart is beating, all the activities in the body is taking place, and one is able to do all the activity, one is able to speak, one is able to hear. Everything that is happening is because of the presence of the consciousness within the body. And this understanding of the consciousness is extremely important. When we remember that it is because of the consciousness that we exist. The consciousness is not there, we don't exist. So this basic understanding is really important, and that is possible only in the human form of life. So that is the first two lines here: dehāpatya-kalatrādiṣv, ātma-sainyeṣv, asatsv api. So in this particular two lines, Srila Shukadeva Goswami is conveying the situation of the conditioned living entity. So the conditioned living entity is, because of being attached to the body, to the wife, to the children, to everything related to the body, one thinks that this is going to save them from from all the tribulations that they are going to face, and they are like the infallible soldiers. So that is the thinking, that they are the infallible soldiers who are protecting me. But teṣāṁ pramatto nidhanaṁ. So when because of the attachment, too much attachment, one is thinking that. We actually see in the story of Valmiki Muni as well. When before becoming a saint, he was a robber. So he was called Ratnakar, and he was robbing, and he was bringing all the things that he was robbing, and he was giving it to his family. And then he was thinking that this is really great. Then once he sees Narada Muni, and then Narada Muni tells him to go and ask to his family about whether they will bear the consequences of your action. So because he has been looting all the people, he has been giving all the people so much afflictions. If he gets something bad in return for doing all those bad actions, is his family going to support him or take those negative consequences of his action? And he goes and asks his family, and then they say that unfortunately we cannot. So this is the situation in this material world, where one can be engaged in. So that example of Valmiki is very clear there, where he is engaged in supporting his family, but he's doing it through bad means. But even though he is helping the family, but the family will not be able to help him in terms of the repercussions of his bad actions. This is very clearly seen in that story of Valmiki. And Narad Muni actually asks, so then he comes back and he says to Narad Muni that this is the situation, and then he becomes very remorseful of his actions. So he is thinking that I have been doing so much things for my family so that they would be able to share the repercussions of my actions as well. But that is not possible. Yeah, one has to bear the consequences of one's action oneself. No one else is going to bear the consequences. Even if the others maybe in a totally selfish way want to bear it, but they will not be able to do it. So then he understands, and then he stops doing the robbery, and he and it is said that he Sri Narada Muni wanted him to say Rama, but he was saying Mara, Mara, Mara. Mara, 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 Ram, Ram, Ram. So Mara in the Hindi or the Sanskrit language would mean that kill kind of thing. So because he was in that robbing state of mind, he was not even able to say Ram directly, but he was saying Mara, 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 Maram, Ram, 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 Ram. So when Mara is repeated, it becomes Ram. And he got absorbed in chanting the holy names of Sri Ram. He got so much absorbed that he became oblivious to his material body. He was not aware of his material body at all. And there was an anthill that started coming on him. And that's what Valmiki means, actually. It means the person who had the anthill on him. So this is the wonderful story of the sage who has written Ramayana. And very clearly, that particular story is reflecting this verse. Dehāpatya-kalatrādiṣv ātma-sainyeṣv asatsv. So he was thinking that the family for which he was robbing are going to be his infallible soldiers. And Narada Muni, who is the transcendental personality, pure devotee of Krishna, he became his guru. Tasmād gurum prapadyeta jignasu shreya uttamam shabde parecha nishnatam brahmani upasamashrayam. So this is the, so he was fortunate enough to get Srila Narada Muni as his guru, and he surrendered. And he was actually jignasu shreya uttamam. He was inquisitive. He wanted to understand what is ultimately beneficial for him, shreya, and he wanted to become transcendental to the modes of material nature. So these are the qualifications of the disciple. The disciple has to be inquisitive. The disciple needs to understand what is ultimately beneficial, and the disciple should know that that one is in the conditioned material existence, one is under the influence of the modes of material nature, and one has to udgata tamam. One has to transcend the modes of material nature, which is at the material world, there is a lot of tamoguna and rajoguna, which is the mode of ignorance and mode of passion. And a little bit of mode of goodness is present. But mainly that is why called uttamam, udgata tamam. So one is transcending the modes of material nature. So when one has got those inclinations, then one tasmad gurum prapadyeta, one surrenders onto the guru. Jignasu shreyotamam, shabde parecha nishnatam brahmani upasamashrayam. So what are the qualifications of the guru? Qualifications of the guru is absorbed in the transcendental sound vibrations of the Lord. and the Guru is totally surrendered onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shabde parecha nishnatam brahmani upasamashrayam. He's totally surrendered onto Brahma. Param Brahma, Param Dhama, Pavitram Paramam Bhavan, Purusham Shashvatam Divyam, Adi Devam Ajam Vibhum. So Arjuna addresses Krishna with these wonderful words. So Arjuna says to Krishna that you are the supreme Brahman, Param Brahma. You are the supreme abode, Param Dhama. You are the supremely pure person, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan. You are the supreme person, Purusham. You are the original personality from whom everything emanates. Shashvatam, you are the eternal person. Divyam, you are divine. And Adi Devam, you are the origin of all the demigods. Ajam, you are unborn. And Vibhum, you are the greatest. This is the understanding. Aham sarvasya prabho matta sarvam pravartate. Iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. So when one is in that state of mind, when one understands that Krishna is the origin of everything, aham sarvasya prabho, and everything is coming from Krishna, matta sarvam pravartate. When one knows this very clearly, iti matva, what does one do? Bhajante mam. One engages in loving devotional service of Krishna. And how does one engage in loving devotional service? Buddha. Who is such a person? He is an intelligent person. And how does he engage in the service? Bhava samanvita. With total absorption in the total attraction to the supremely attractive personality of Godhead. So there is this beautiful verse by Srila Rupa Goswami, Ma prekshishta tavayadi sakhe bandhu sange stiranga. So he says that please don't look at Keshi Tirtopa Kanthe. So this is Smeram Bhangi Traya Parichitam Shachi Vistrina Drishtim. So when one is remembering this threefold bended form of Krishna, Bhangi Traya Parichitam Shachi Vistrina Drishtim, and his sidelong glances, Vamshi Nyasta Adharakishalayam Ujvalam Chandrakirna. And Krishna has got his flutes on his lips, and he is standing on the full moon night. Adharakishalayam Ujvalam Vamshi Nyasta Adharakishalayam Ujvalam Chandrakirna Govindakyam Haritanum iti Keshi Tirtopa Kanthe. So his name is Govinda. So this is Govinda who gives the pleasure to everyone, to the senses and everyone. So Govindakyam Haritanum iti Keshi Tirtopa Kanthe. He is there on the banks of the Keshi Ghat. Ma prekshishta. So Srila Rupa Goswami is saying that don't look at this person. Don't look at this transcendental supreme personality of Godhead, Govinda, who is standing on the banks of Keshi Ghat in a full moon night, in the threefold bending form, giving the sidelong glances. Don't look at this person. Ma prekshishta. When you should not look at this person, tava yadi sakhe bandhu sange stiranga. If you are attached to your family and friends, don't look at this person. So this is the statement of Srila Rupa Goswami, and this particular verse is basically categorizing the persons here. Dehāpatya-kalatrādiṣv ātma-sainyeṣv asatsv teṣāṁ pramatto nidhanaṁ paśyann api na paśyati. So when one is in that consciousness, that this is the only existence. The only existence is that I am this body, and let me enjoy this body as much as I can. because there is only one life. So this is unfortunately, this is a hedonistic way of life where so one is thinking that there is this only one life, and this life has to be enjoyed to the fullest. And the best way of enjoying the life to the fullest is to engage the senses totally and 100% in enjoying the sense objects. So this is the unfortunately Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita about namam dushkritino modha prapadyante naradhama maya paharata jnana asuram bhavamashri. So when one is maya paharata jnana, so this is the category. So when the actual transcendental knowledge is covered by, is actually kidnapped by the material energy, then one is not surrendering onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prapadyante. So Krishna says, and why one is not surrendering? Because dushkriti. So if one is engaging in sinful activities, yesham tu antagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva moha vinirmukta bhajante mam dhradavrta. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that when one has stopped engaging in sinful activities, yesham tu antagatam papam jananam punya karmanam, and one has started engaging in pious activities, te dvandva moha vinirmukta. Such a person, being freed from the dualities, dvandva and moha, attachment, free from that, what do they do? Bhajante mam dhradavrata. So such people engage in loving devotional service of me with determination, dhradavrata. So that is the qualification for engaging in loving devotional service of Krishna. But one of the wonderful states is about the Supreme Personality of Godhead is that he is constantly, so he is present as the super soul, and he is whatever birth a living entity is taking, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present with the living entity, and always giving the instructions from within in order to progress further and come out of this cycle of birth and death. So this is the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that he, even though the living entity in the demoniac tendency of mind might vimukha cetasa, might not be looking at the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is costlessly merciful and always trying to bring all the living entities back home, back to Godhead. So this is a transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is even if one can understand an iota of that mercy, one will become free from all attachments. So this verse is talking about those attachments. Dehāpatya-kalatrādiṣv ātma-sainyeṣv asatsv teṣāṁ pramatto nidhanaṁ paśyann api na paśyati. So even though one is seeing that, one is not seeing it. Paśyann api na paśyati. What does it mean? We were discussing this in previously many of the classes as well, about this story where Yudhishthira Maharaj is asked by the Yaksha, what is the most surprising thing in this whole universe? And he says that ahani bhutani gachanti yamalayam shesha sthavaram ichanti atashcharya kim param. So Yudhishthira Maharaj says that at every moment one person or another person is dying, but the remaining people think that I'm going to stay here. I'm not going to die. It's a wishful thinking, unfortunately. But the wishful thinking is based on something that is concrete, something that is real. What is that concrete? What is that real? Our original constitutional position, which is totally separate from the material body that we have. So that understanding is possible in this human form of life, and that's the verse that we were talking, and we'll end with that verse. Nrideha madhyam sulabham sudurlabham. So this human form of body, which is sulabham in the sense that it is very easily attained. It is very, with this human form of body, one can easily attain the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's why it is sulabham. But it is sudurlabham. It is very rare. It is not easily attained. Nidhanaṁ sulabham sudurlabham plavam sukalpam guru karnadharam. And it is a plavam sukalpam. It is like a ship. It is a boat or a ship that helps one to cross over the cycle, the ocean of birth and death. And Guru Karnadharam, the Guru, the spiritual master, is the captain of the ship. Mayanukulena nabhasva teritam. And Krishna is sending the wind in the proper direction, so that the captain of the ship, who is the spiritual master, can guide the ship through the cycle, through the ocean of the cycle of birth and death. Puman bhavadbhiya na taret sa atma. With all these wonderful situations that is given to the living entity, if one does not cross over this ocean of birth and death, such a person is unfortunately atmaha, is unfortunately actually killing themselves, they said. So what does it mean? That not understanding one's constitutional position as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is possible only in the human form of life. And when one is not doing that, one is unfortunately wasting that invaluable gift that is a human form of life. So that is the, if you want to conclude that verse, that would be the conclusion. Dehāpatya-kalatrādiṣv ātma-sainyeṣv asatsv api teṣāṁ pramatto nidhanaṁ paśyann api na paśyati. Persons devoid of ātma-tattva do not inquire into the problems of life, being too attached to the fallible soldiers like the body, children, and wife. Although sufficiently experienced, they still do not see their inevitable destruction. So what is the real problems of life? That real problems is janma mrityu jara vyadhi dukkha doshanudarshan. That is the understanding that the birth is giving rise to death, janma and mrityu, and between the birth and death there is jara and vyadhi. There is old age and disease. So these are the real problems of the conditioned existence, and that can be overcome when one understands one's eternal position as an eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one clearly understands, when one is clearly in that state of mind, then iha yasya haredasya karmana manasa gira nikilasvapi avisthasu jivan mukta sauchyade. So in that state, when one is engaged in loving devotional service of Krishna through karmana, manasa, and gira, through one's activities, through one's mind, and through one's speech, if one is when one is gets engaged, nikhila swapi avasthasu jivan mukta sauchyade. One might be staying in any situation in this whole universe in a conditioned state, one will still be in a liberated existence. Why liberated existence? Because 100% knows that all these things that are happening to my mind body is not affecting me. It is something external to me. And when one is in that state of existence, one is in a liberated state. And that state of existence can exist eternally only when one is surrendered onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So with that, I would like to conclude this discussion of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, Text 4. And I'm just seeing the comment, Avijit Behra, saying Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Om Krishna Namah. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namaham Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paśyati Deshatarine Sarvam Shri Krishnarpanamastu Krishne Madrastu Hare Krishna.